Okay, call to order the water demand meeting, Monterey Peninsula Water Management District for Thursday, October the 3rd, 2024. And I got 1:33 p.m. Roll call, please.
Director Paul?
Here.
Chair Edwards?
Here.
Director Anderson should be joining us shortly.
All right. Next item, we have anybody out there for public comments? They have 3 minutes.
We do have one member of the public in attendance, but I see no raised hands.
No raised hands. Okay.
Director Anderson has just joined.
Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, good.
Okay.
Hi.
We will move to action items. And what's that first action item, GM?
That would be consider adoption of the minutes from the last meeting in August 1st.
Okay.
I have no corrections. I move adoption.
Second.
And then we have a first and I have a second. Anyone in the public wish to comment on that item?
Chair Edwards, I see no raised hands.
Okay. We'll take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
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 Okay.
Chair Edwards, because this
Wait.
is a remote meeting, you do need to do roll call vote.
Okay. Clean that up. Let's have a roll call. Sarah, please.
Director Anderson?
Yes.
Director Paul?
Yes.
Chair Edwards?
Yes.
Minutes are adopted 3-0.
Thank you. Next item, number 2, GM.
Yeah, you may recall in the correspondence of the last board meeting was a letter from Dakota Birch, and there was some discussion about whether that item should be brought to this committee, which we felt appropriate. And I believe Stephanie Locke, you're going to address the letter?
Yeah, I don't really have much more to say other than the staff report that was provided to you gave kind of a history on how we had started giving a credit for multifamily dwellings that put in gray water for toilet flushing and laundry back in 2019, and then added single family residences in 2020. But by 2022, we had discovered that there were a lot of enforcement issues, and so recommended that the board not continue that credit, which the board agreed to. However, as part of that, I want to point out that we do have rebates for gray water systems and rainwater storage. We do encourage these types of systems to be put in, and that the rebates do result in lower water bills over time, and therefore are an initiative for people to install the system. And landscapes that are put in as part of new construction that rely entirely on rainwater catchment for irrigation also get an incentive, and then it lowers the amount of potable water that is required for the water permit. So staff recommends no action be taken at this time regarding adding this back in as a credit. But I thought I would also suggest that maybe the board think about, or the committee think about recommending that we pursue a rebate for interior rainwater and gray water systems, which would be kind of, right now we have a rebate for outdoor rainwater and gray water systems. We do not have a rebate that would give for indoor. So anyway, that was just a thought that I had in responding to this. But that's really all I had to say with it.
Yeah, and let me give a more tangible example of why a credit's a bad idea. On the Presidio, the Army built a couple of barracks or dorms, as we now like to call them, using rainwater catchment to flush toilets. And the original design standard was to be about 2/3 of the year, or as many as 9 months out of the year, they could cover it, and then they'd have to be on Cal-Am for the remainder. And what was discovered is they really didn't work. And so had a credit been issued and the project built, and then it was determined that they don't work and they were all stripped out and now they're 100% back on Cal-Am, then we would have been doing the wrong thing. Let's just call it that. So clearly, rainwater, because it's not a self-contained system, can be a problem. Gray water, typically, where you're taking your shower water or your sink water and running it through a cleaning system to then use to flush toilets and what have you, could be treated that way. But when home ownership changes, or you go from a family of 4, or you go from one set of conditions to another set of conditions, the water accounting doesn't always line up either. And so there's no guarantee that you'll always have sufficient supply to do the toilet flushing, and that's a public health issue too. And so, we've had a little bit of pushback on gray water systems, similar to the atmospheric water generators, where the county Department of Public Health said, you really need to guarantee that it's a firm supply, not an interruptible supply. And I think some of the engineering that I've seen for residential or multi-residential doesn't clearly meet the engineering standards to know that it's a reliable, 100% always there kind of system. So I think incentivizing through rebates, good. Providing credit is a little dicey. So.
Okay, Director Paul and then Director Anderson. Go ahead.
Yeah, I have several questions. And first, I thank you for the memo. It was the explanations of the various kinds of problems, technical and enforcement with the where it was very clear, and it was good to remind me anyway, because although we'd gone over it a few years ago, I needed reminding. So thank you for that. But I do have some questions. And first of all, that has to do with new versus old, new construction versus existing houses. And your memo said that it's pretty complicated and expensive to change the plumbing and the metering and all that for existing houses. But what about new construction? Should we consider, this is a question to think about, should we consider credits for new construction or for new multi-unit construction? Just a question to put out there. Also, your idea of rebates for interior rainwater and or gray water, are you thinking single family housing, multi-unit, commercial? It's another one of my.
Well, I think that primarily I was thinking single family. I believe that there is kind of a open slot for commercial rebates or non-residential rebates that could be considered separately if somebody came in and proposed to do a large system like this for some type of a non-residential use. And I think we originally agreed with the multifamily residential use because the chances of having a property manager there who could make sure that the system was operated correctly was much greater than the single family. But one of the things that we've kind of discovered over time, which they have to have a potable backup for the system. Mm-hmm. And that's really just a matter of unhooking one hose bib and hooking it to a different hose bib to switch over the sources. And so the concern is that if it became, if it became difficult to manage, they would just switch it over. We'd never know. Mm-hmm. And then the second problem is that that because of that ease, and over time as properties change ownership, the new owners may not want to operate that type of a system, and so they would be able to do that. So those are the big concerns.
Yeah, very significant ones. Sounds like. All right, thank you.
Okay, Director Anderson, go ahead.
Yeah, I didn't see what Karen was talking about something that you sent, Dave. Somehow I didn't see that, but I'll go ahead with my question.
I was just referring to the memo in the agenda packet on this item. That's all.
The 2022 memo.
2022 memo. I'm sorry.
Yeah, where all the problems with giving credits were explained. And
Okay,
and
well, okay. So you're thinking that perhaps doing something like this for just indoor rather than having any dependence on outdoor and rain and so forth, or not rain, but outdoor watering is something that the district has thought about?
Well, we currently have rebates for outdoor rainwater harvesting and gray water irrigation. So the only thing we don't have is a rebate for a system that would take rainwater and plumb in for use inside the house, which you can.
Okay,
And so rather than doing a credit for these things that I think is just really problematic, my suggestion would be we could consider doing a rebate for these types of systems.
and the big worry or the thing that makes you uncomfortable about the indoor is having enough gray water to run the toilets and the showers and so forth?
That's one potential issue, but the other issue is just the ease of being able to switch over to a potable system.
Oh, yeah, okay,
And yeah, and I think
that
that,
makes sense.
that we could incentivize by doing a rebate and encourage people to join into that type of if they wanted to do that kind of a project, we could do that. Ultimately, if they ended up on potable water, a rebate is not the same thing as a credit that goes
Yeah.
toward offsetting fixtures.
Okay, thank you.
I'm thinking back on this, but I thought we approved something for the gray water to be used for washing machines. I think Monterey was talking about an apartment building or something. I thought we approved something like that, or we didn't?
Stephanie, did we ever issue the permit for that?
Yes, there was a time period where we did approve that, and it came back to the committee to discontinue the credit.
But did we issue a permit to an apartment building that put the system in?
That particular does not, I think there was maybe a single family dwelling that did. I don't
Okay.
remember the apartment building.
I remember it was something that we did with gray water that they could bring it in and, and now I'm reading, we had problems and discontinued it. So,
Yeah, Alvin, we did have a project that was going to use it for a multifamily unit in Monterey. And I don't believe they came in and ever finalized that permit.
Well,
okay.
but let's cover two other ones. I believe the Portola put in a Water City gray water laundry system, Stephanie, didn't they?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, somebody was entered into a
Asilomar.
contract. Was it a Asilomar perhaps? Yeah.
They did, yeah.
But also, in effect, we offered a credit for American Tin Cannery Hotel under their original design. Under special circumstances, the board agreed to consider gray water and rainwater capture technologies as an offset. Ultimately, I think they downsized the number of rooms and they don't have to use the technology. But we did account for gray water system in the original discussion of the.
Yeah, I think that actually is still part of their proposal, Dave.
Is it? Yeah.
Okay, well, my next question is, if we okay this, will everything be taken care of the health department? So we don't have to come back people are doing something or they switched it over. Are we gonna be safe on this one when we say, okay, go ahead? Another thing, we got people out of Santa Cruz coming in here telling us something that, that they got a project and we're jumping on it, but we got problems. I don't want to go through it.
Well,
If-
no, I think the
if it's all-
recommendation is that you don't do anything with the credit at this time. And you can discuss whether or not you want to pursue a rebate, which would have nothing to do with the health department or anything. I mean, they have to meet health department standards. But the rebate would just be giving them money to help put the system in.
Well, I don't want people to be spending money and they're going to have problems with the health department.
Right.
So, I
Well, they have to-
I feel that the board shouldn't approve something that haven't been through the health department, that everything can be taken care of. That's my big push right now. So why approve it? And then the health department is saying, no, we had that problem before when people start using gray water inside. And the health department say, well, they can switch to regular water. And, we got that problem right there. So I want to be safe when we say this, when we do this. So, Mr. Laredo, and I see Fran on board, any comments on that? Can we do it and feel
Excuse me,
safe?
Chair Edwards, I do have Dakota in the meeting that she does have her hand raised. Do you want to take questions now or later?
We'll
Right.
take them after we finish answering our question, the board questions, or the committee questions, and then we'll go to her. Go ahead there, Stephanie,
Yeah, I just wanted to point out that if we were to add a rebate, they have to actually install the system before they apply for a rebate, which would require that they get the approvals through the health department and the inspections through the jurisdiction.
okay.
So that's a,
So go ahead there.
I mean, that's, they have to really have faith that they're gonna be able to use it. And I mean, getting credit is one thing, getting a permit for the use is another. Am I misunderstanding?
Now, they would still have to get permits. Okay, so essentially what I'm suggesting is that we not reinstate a credit and that instead consider doing a rebate for these systems that would be like all of our rebates after you've purchased and installed the system, that you apply for a rebate. For somebody to actually go through the project and install one of these systems, they have to get the approvals through the health department and through the cities or county. So they would have to have all of those approvals before a rebate would ever be issued.
Yeah.
Okay, Director Paul, go ahead.
One last question from me. Are you proposing we consider a rebate both for gray water and rainwater storage for interior use?
That would be my suggestion, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, Sarah, we had that hand up. We'll let her speak.
Okay, 1 minute. When you're ready, Dakota, you may address the committee.
Yeah, hi, this is Dakota Birch, landscape architect. I'm the author of the letter. Thanks for the opportunity to let me comment on this. As I wrote in the letter, I had a project in Carmel where it was the first to get water credits for rainwater harvesting. And then I was very surprised to hear that the board was discontinuing those water credits so that they wouldn't be allowed in the future. And so I searched through the archives of the meeting agendas and to figure out what the discussion was about. And it sounded like a lot of the concerns were about the feasibility of implementation and permitting. And these systems are written up in detail in the California Plumbing Code. And as you guys mentioned, in order to implement them, you have to go through the building department, the health department, and all of that. So it shouldn't be a concern of the water district. And I have many clients in the area who have successfully implemented rainwater and gray water systems, saving tens of thousands of gallons of water. And so I'm hoping that they can receive water credits if they want to in the future. So the district should really, in my opinion, only be concerned about whether the applicant can show calculations showing that the system will meet the demand of the fixtures being supplied. As in the case with the project I worked on, the water credits are given based on the fixtures that are supplied. So you don't have to plumb the whole house or multiple fixtures, but you get credits based on the number of fixtures that will not rely on potable water in the future. And let's see, I joined late, but I heard you talking about rebates instead of credits. And in my experience, these systems, cost, many tens of thousands of dollars to implement, $40,000 to $100,000. And in the case of the project in Carmel, they wouldn't have been able to build the accessory dwelling unit that they wanted to build without the rainwater harvesting system, which cost an additional probably $50,000 to $100,000. And rebates, in my experience, are insignificant for a project like that. But water credits would allow people to build them where they wouldn't otherwise be able to and save water, which is the ultimate goal of this water credit situation, is to reduce potable water use. So the concerns about permitting and the health department are really taken care of, as anybody who does this has to get a building permit anyway. And all the stuff about, backup water and backflow protection and filtration and all of that is taken care of in the California Plumbing Code.
Okay,
It-
I get right with you, Director Paul. Dave, Stephanie, I think I heard him say it's a lot of these in the area, but it's a lot of them are probably up in Santa Cruz, but not here. Correct me if I'm wrong, or
I've personally been involved with a few projects in Carmel area and other projects from San Francisco down to your area.
okay.
But it is kind of a new and growing sustainable technology.
Okay, well, I'm concerned about Monterey area, Monterey Peninsula.
Mhm.
That's what I'm concerned about. And if we got a bunch of these floating out there we don't know about, we better track them down and put them on record. That's what I'm concerned about. Go ahead, Director Paul.
Thank you, Chair. Dakota, did you say that the plumbing code requires separate plumbing for gray water and potable water?
Well,
Did
yeah, I mean,
Did
as
I
I
hear
wrote
that
about,
right?
it requires backflow protection if there's a cross connection. And yes, it does require separate plumbing for non-potable water, which is separate from potable water. And then gray water and rainwater, as I described in my letter, are totally different water sources and are not ever combined. And I've never seen gray water go indoors for toilet flushing.
Mm.
There are, because that's a dirtier source of water, whereas rainwater is clean water that falls from the sky and is collected from roof surfaces. And that is what's more often used indoors for toilet flushing and laundry washing.
So what about the concern that homeowners could easily switch to using potable water and we wouldn't be aware of it? That's seems like that's a major concern.
Well,
Is there anything to prevent that in place to prevent that?
yeah, I think proper metering would cover that. For example, in the project I worked on, we're going to be installing water meters on the water coming out of the rainwater system, as well as the potable water backup coming into the system. So if that is monitored, once a year or every so often, you'll be able to see if backup water is being used instead of non-potable water. And if a customer were to, fill up a tank with a hose or something, or I don't know, there are bypasses that you might not be able to check, but I guess that's always a liability. But you should see non-potable water being used and no backup water being used.
So if we check the meters.
Right.
Mhm. Okay, thank you.
Okay,
That sounds like a burden
any,
department.
go ahead, Director Anderson.
I was gonna say, who's the checking the meters? Who's
Yeah.
gonna do that? And what, what would be required? Is maybe there's some kind of a technology coming up that's going to be able to distinguish between those and tell you if clean water had just been turned on to supply these indoor needs. I don't know.
Well, the clients that I've had who install these types of systems are passionate about saving water, and they're not going to, spend a fortune to install a rainwater harvesting system only to bypass it with potable water.
That may be true for the builders, but what about somebody that buys the house and moves in and doesn't care?
In my experience, it's the homeowners who have decided to install these systems, not the builders.
No, I understand that.
Yeah,
But somebody could buy the house that doesn't care much about
right.
the water.
Yeah, well, in the Carmel project example, the water district did require something in the deed, a deed restriction that the system would be included and maintained by future owners.
Okay,
Good idea, but thank
Dave
you.
and Stephanie, how y'all want to approach this? I read your recommendation and y'all saying no action. How y'all want to approach this?
I still stand by the recommendation. I think that, I think it's problematic.
Okay, Dave?
Well, yeah, and I can see it either way. The fact of the matter though is that, we're doing an allocation right now. There's going to be wet water available a year from basically next month. Jurisdictional allocations can be made. So the premise that we need to find every way possible to allow a homeowner to add fixtures is being mitigated by a new allocation of the Pure Water Monterey expansion.
Mhm.
So, I kind of have to stand by my division manager's recommendation.
Okay, Mr. Laredo, are we going to have any problems with this one?
I don't see any problems right now. Again, the water landscape is going to change drastically relatively soon. So, this may be a moot issue very, very quickly.
Okay, my
Well,
next
and there's
question.
no thing with the rainwater anybody's gonna be able to count on. I mean, I take Dave's point that we're already recycling water. And we're doing a good job of it, and there's a major component of our water, our everyday water, that's being recycled and filtered, and maybe someday in the future we'll need these, and we'll have a better idea about how to do it. It's
Well,
not
I
a
think
bad
that,
idea.
yeah, Director Anderson, I think also the cost of potable water provides an economic incentive to try to build these systems, especially in new construction where it's a little easier to do.
Mhm.
That may be incentive enough for a homeowner, but you know, I understand where the concept of, I mean, credit has been like currency for
Mhm.
building projects. I just, as Michael said, the landscape is about to change.
Okay, my next question is this. We had board members talk about this. How do we bring this to the board? And if this gentleman want to appeal our recommendation, how does he do it? You know, do we agendize this, have the board talk about it? We give them the
This was
committee
a re-
recommendation? Go ahead,
This was a
Stephanie.
request by the public to look at this. The board has already taken action on the credit. And I think the fact that we're discussing it today is sufficient response.
Okay, I want something to report back to the full board. Because we had two board members bring it up, so if the general manager can add it to his report at the next board meeting, that we took care of it. And we talked about it. And we have this tape, the Zoom meeting for proof. Okay. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
and it's not an
Paul.
appealable decision at this point because it's already been made.
Mhm.
Okay. Director Paul, go ahead.
I just want to say that I agree with you, Chair Edwards. I think it, you know, the board should be informed. It doesn't necessarily have to be an action item, but the board should be informed, you know, and understand, take the time to educate the board at least and what the concerns are. And I feel torn because I think people who have invested time and resources to develop these systems, it's a worthy effort. But I do understand the problems with monitoring and enforcement. So I think your recommendation is reasonable. But I think we should let all the board members know about these issues.
Oh, yeah. I agree. So Jim, if you can put it in your report.
Yep, I just
we can
added
put-
it to the list.
Thank you. And
Well, I think-
Sarah, we've got to get together because the agenda keeps changing.
Right.
I've got a couple other things.
Okay.
y'all don't approve that agenda to after administrative meeting. Okay, we're gonna close this item out.
Yeah, I should commend Mr. Birch on a very thoughtful and a well-crafted letter.
Absolutely.
I do
Yes.
believe that a lot of the fundamentals in that letter remain true today. I mean, it's not preventing somebody from building a system. It's just we're not reinstating the credit to do so. And you know, hopefully the economics of doing so become even more and more compelling going forward. So.
Well, I
Okay,
think, yeah, your point
Well-
also about things are going to be changing or could be changing is a really good one.
all right, next item, Jim.
The next item is the one I don't want to touch. No.
I know you don't. I don't want you to touch it. Man,
Yeah, this is an initiative in no small part created by having the data and now possibly having the time to address it. But there are a number of open permits. These are not recent permits. Everything that's happened in the last few years is not subject to what the discussion is going to be. And I guess Stephanie Kister Campbell, you're going to present on this one? Yeah.
Yes, and Gabby Bravo is also here from our division to jump in and add to the discussion and answer questions as we go through. So I'll start by reminding you, our division regularly performs inspections of properties to ensure compliance with their regulations. Some properties do fail because they have additional unpermitted water fixtures. When this happens, the properties are given a notice to permit or remove the fixtures. And some of these properties choose to not comply with our regulations. Ultimately, we file a notice of noncompliance, also known as a lien, on the title. Okay, so that process has been ongoing for folks that call for a final inspection. In addition to all of those properties, we have identified 1,500 open water permits issued from 93 up till 2017, where they did not call for a final inspection. So staff is focusing on closing these permits and resolving the non-compliant issues, which often involve unpermitted water fixtures. So as I go through, basically, we're going to be seeking direction from the committee on handling these violations, enforcing compliance, particularly regarding a possible amnesty period for non-compliant fixtures. So these open permits, as you can imagine, dating back as far as 93, when we send these letters, the owner may or may not be aware of the permit. Typically, they are in the belief that all the proper inspections were done and are not aware that this was missed. So obviously, we're letting them know what had occurred and that an inspection is required. You know, in 2000, we started our deed restriction process, which is, you know, recorded on the title so that it can inform any new buyer of requirements. So we try and communicate those requirements in that manner. And we regularly inform real estate agents, and, you know, it's our belief that a property owner should do their due diligence as to understanding the regulations that apply to their properties. That being said, about 68% of properties do comply with their water permit requirements, you know, over on the averages. And typically failures are due to incorrect or unpermitted additional water fixtures. So we've identified two possible options for resolving these non-compliant properties. And, you know, the goal is to try and to clear the backlog and clear, you know, unpermitted water fixtures, essentially. We would like to clear the deck, so to speak. So option one is proposing an amnesty period, which might be maybe a year long, and it would allow properties to legalize their unpermitted water fixtures. So we would do this without debiting the jurisdiction, and we would potentially waive many of the fees associated with this. So basically, they would be given an amnesty period to be able to keep their unpermitted fixtures, and this would result in the highest amount of compliance. All right. Let's see here. Then within that category of the amnesty period, there are properties that have may not have unpermitted fixtures, but they changed the scope of their project a little. Maybe they put less stuff in than they originally planned. Normally, we would charge fees for amending the permit and changing the paperwork to be compliant. In this amnesty program, we may consider including waiving those fees as well, just again to clear the deck for, you know, permit from, you know, 95 they didn't know anything about, just to minimize the burden on the people with these permits and just make it easy. This would also involve waiving fees for things like missed inspections, re-inspections, things of that nature. Option two would be more to keep the process as it is, which would be to force compliance with our current regulations, meaning if they have unpermitted fixtures, they would have to go to the jurisdiction and ask for some of their water allocation, which may or may not be granted. Or they could try and offset their fixtures with high efficiency appliances and whatnot. They would have to pay all the associated fees associated with that. And they may ultimately have to remove the fixture, cap it, seal it over, and be re-inspected. So that would be today's process. You know, we wouldn't get as much compliance. More people may opt just to get a lien on the title and leave it in that condition. As you can imagine, if we're going out doing this inspection today from a 30-year-old permit, owners are going to feel penalized. You know, they're going to have a lot of feelings about us coming into their property at this time and asking them to take action. So that's one of the reasons behind our proposal of an amnesty period, to help smooth that over and ultimately just, you know, get people in compliance. There are a couple other items we want you to help discuss with us. You know, some of these properties have transferred title since obviously 93, 2005. And so we'd like to discuss how should that be handled. If we have a new property owner that was not involved in a previous project, how does that play into our choices here? And then finally, discussion of people that are just plain non-responsive. You know, we send a letter, we ask for an inspection, and they just do not respond. Our normal process would just be, again, to put a notice of non-compliance on the title. And at whatever point they decide to deal with it, there'd be fees associated with that action at, you know, at that time. So if we exited the amnesty period, and they dealt with it later, they would just be subject again back to the normal process. So obviously we'll discuss all this. Our staff's recommendation is we'd like to discuss the amnesty period and just try and get to clearing the field here.
Okay, I'm gonna ask the first big question, then I'll go to you, Director Paul. How did we get here? What we've been doing, I came on the board in 1997. Now, all that stuff prior to that, you know, I had nothing to do with. But from 1997 to 2010, I was on the board and never heard anything like this. How did we get so far behind? I'll go to you, Stephanie. You're the department head. Go ahead.
So I think that we do 900 plus final inspections every year. And people call us to schedule their final inspections. We don't know necessarily when a project is completed. And especially back in the 90s and the early 2000s, the jurisdictions didn't require people to get a water inspection before they get their final building inspection. And so those are these people that have slipped through at this point. We have been sending letters to permit holders after 2017, when we hired a new administrative assistant in our office. And so we're trying to stay on top of all of those newer permits, but these older permits have been out there and we just have not had the ability to undertake an effort like this. We have Pure Water Monterey expansion coming online next year, which will result in new allocation of water. And we would really like to get as much of this cleaned up as possible before that allocation is out.
Dave, can you help me out on that question right there?
Yeah, I don't have much to add to that other than, you know, the database made it a little more accessible to identify these. And Stephanie and Gabby figured out how to like pull this information out to make it possible. But yeah, the lack of a follow-up, if somebody was told to call us for a final and they didn't call, I suspect there wasn't a list of pending final inspections at that time. And so they just became stale.
Okay, Director Paul, go ahead with your question.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions, but I would like to hear what Fran has to say about this. So a couple of my questions are, what would, if in the amnesty approach, what would the homeowner have to do to come into compliance? And it seems to me there's a distinction between a violation that is basically using more water than allowed versus some kind of technical violation where they're not using more water. That if it's a violation where they're not using more water, like they just amended their project and didn't report it or something like that, that seems pretty easy to forgive. But somebody that's using more water, that's a different situation. Also, you said that since 2000, you've been using, is when you adopted the deed restriction process. So that means that, anybody that bought a home since then basically was on notice about if there was an issue with water regulation compliance, right? So Yeah, so those are some of my questions. How would someone who has a home that has a violation where they're using more water, what would they have to do to get into compliance? Are you thinking that when the new water comes online, that they will have to obtain additional water credits or something
Yeah,
else?
so in the amnesty proposal, they would fill out a water permit application for the additional fixtures, if when they have additional fixtures. And they would, and this is all being developed here, but they would go to the city to get, authorization that they're allowed to keep those fixtures, because they still need to meet code and safety, right? So, but they wouldn't be asking that city for some of their water. They would be getting sign off that those fixtures, are fit to be legalized. And then they would come to the district and we would not require a debit for those fixtures. And we would waive, fees associated with that. And so basically it would be a very easy way for them to come into compliance.
Okay.
Well, and I think that there's a question about that because earlier when we discussed it, we were talking about fees and the fees being paid as part of this, but the water would be accounted for separately and would not come from a jurisdiction's water allocation. It may come from our district reserve allocation, as an example, but it would not result in a debit to the actual jurisdictions because some of the jurisdictions have very, very little water left in them at this point, which is also part of the reason that as we go through this effort, there's actually kind of a second step in it, which is we have a bunch of deed restricted properties right now that have violations on them, but because the jurisdictions won't authorize water, they're still in violation.
Okay, Director Anderson, any questions?
Not at this time. I'm trying to get clearer on all this. There's lots of moving parts. Obviously, if somebody's in violation now and can't get more water, that's just a holding pattern, right? And then hopefully they come forward when there's water available so that they can pay for whatever it is they need to come into permit policies.
Okay,
That was a lot of nothing that mumbling here.
okay, Fran, you on. How do we start cleaning this up?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. I did have an extensive conversation with staff this morning, and there are details in the staff note that need to be addressed, which Stephanie will be doing prior to the board meeting. So at this point, I don't believe that I could give you a definitive answer other than if you want to look at our Rule 23A1, and don't do it now. The reason I mention it is it shows you what our normal procedure is. And so when you look at amnesty and what is being proposed, it would be variations from those. Now, there are ways of meeting those variations, and that is what will be brought before you. And so at this point, I'm really not able to say more other than I look forward to working with Stephanie and cleaning this up so that it's clearer. One other thing I would mention is if the permit was issued in 1993, as an example, our rules may have been different then, and therefore the compliance for those people would be different than someone, say, in 2000. So that's a distinction that has to be made. And Stephanie, I almost think we need to make categories as to, from staff's perspective, what has to be done with each one of these under whatever program, the board directs. The other thing is that even though we have been recording deed restrictions since 2000, the primary one is for public access. It's only if they have the high efficiency fixtures where you'll have a deed restriction that itemizes what the limitations are as far as specific water use fixtures on a project. So even though we have been doing deed restrictions religiously, not all of them are showing you specifically what the restricted fixtures are to then compare with what's on the property when we get in there. So there are many details, and I will look forward to working with staff, and we hope to bring forward a very comprehensive presentation for you at the board meeting. So
Okay,
thank you for asking.
but some of the recommendations I think this committee should start making. Like one of them, from 93 to 2000, I think we need to make that decision as if we go just gonna amnesty that out. And when we start doing deed restrictions, take all those on. But anybody from the past, from 93 to 2000, hey, I think they got a free ride. That's money we should have been collecting. But then no need of going back to them right now and say, well, pay me now. So when you make some recommendations to the board, I think, it's up to the committee, but that's one that I would throw in there myself, that we forgive those, and they got that free ride. But if you start getting deed restrictions, we need to find a way how to do those inspections and collect. And if you need help, you need to tell us you need help. If we need to add some people to your department. Karen, go ahead.
So it seems that it's premature for this committee to make a recommendation now because more work is going to be done on the proposal. That's how I understand the situation.
I think we're looking for the feedback on particularly this concept of allowing violations to be cleared from use of another allocation rather than the jurisdictions.
Well, myself, I would hate for the jurisdiction to say now they collecting on pass. You know, hey, they gave us water, now they're going back, taking it back from us. So we need to, I hate to give them water and then say, well, you owe me 10 acres or 3 acres.
We've already internally said that's a non-starter.
Right.
I mean, it would just, it works
Just make
against
people
everything
mad.
we're trying to do.
I know it. That's why I'm trying to eliminate a bunch of them right now. But if you got a deed restriction, you got to pony up. And I know it's probably our fault we went out there doing inspections. So I'll take a hit for that.
But Director Edwards, let me clarify that a little bit. As Ms. Farina mentioned, the deed restrictions that we're talking about a couple of different types of deed restrictions. There is a deed restriction that is done when a water permit is issued, and this is pretty much post 2000, when somebody installs or agrees to install like a high efficiency clothes washer, dishwasher, or toilets that go beyond our current requirements. And in that case, we record a deed restriction that lists all the fixtures in the house on the title. But what we also, and as it was mentioned by Ms. Farina, only those people who do these special fixtures have these deed restrictions. So it's not every permit that comes in has a deed restriction that shows how many fixtures are in the house. They have a water permit, but the water permit is not recorded on the title. So it's possible a water permit can get lost. It cannot get transferred to a new owner. Various things that they would forget that they ever were supposed to call us for a final inspection, or necessarily what fixtures were installed. So the deed restriction on the permit end doesn't really do us any good as far as how that might improve our enforcement. There's another layer of deed restrictions, which are those properties where we have done a final inspection in the past, and they were not compliant because they had added water fixtures or they didn't have the proper water fixtures installed. And in those cases, when they don't respond to the district, we send them at least 2 letters saying you need to fix these things, or we're going to put a notice on your title. And those properties have a notice on the title that says they're in violation of our rules. So that's, again, that's a step further than just closing these open permits, which is kind of the primary discussion today. But our second step would be going back and finding all of these violations from the past that have a deed restriction on them and clearing those up. And it would be also in the same manner where if we did an amnesty period, then we would go back and notify all those people that they had a year or whatever time to come in and clear their permit, pay the fees, and then we would remove the deed restrictions, pay the fees or do whatever retrofits that they had to do.
Are there big numbers of those, Stephanie?
I don't know that we have quantified the number of deed restrictions at this point. So what we have quantified are those people who have water permits that never called us to do a final inspection.
Okay, go ahead there, Ken.
So this, what you just said makes me wonder, do we need to relook at the information that we include as among on the deeds? Do we need to review what information we do record, under what circumstances we record a deed restriction?
The only thing would improve our current process is if you recorded a deed restriction for every permit we issue. And I can tell you that the amount of effort to do that would be huge. It's very time consuming for staff to issue permits, especially when the property is in a corporation or trust and other types of entities, different entities instead of single person or a couple. And so we have focused primarily on just recording those deed restrictions if something special is required. We could change that, or we could change that so that it applies to certain projects that are larger projects or all new construction. We could come up with probably a couple different types of permits that we could start recording those documents on. But that would be the only thing that I could see as being an improvement over where we are right now.
So maybe
I
you
would
could add that to the list of what you could discuss with Fran, that one question. And the other concern I have is just that we do, for purposes of monitoring usage, we want to have accurate information, and so that's our responsibility. So
we do have that deed restriction, and we've done that consistently since early 2000.
I would just add, unfortunately, a property owner, they come to our office, they sign the deed restriction, that person does have to sign it themselves. And, they don't read the document. They don't even know the content of it. While a responsible property owner would read it, unfortunately, there are just so many times that they are not engaged in the process. So the documents are there, and we want them to work. But if the people aren't using them and abiding by them, it's a lot of work for nothing.
is there a summary? Are they given a very brief summary of what it is? What the deed restriction is about?
Yeah, it's not complicated. It's a short bullet list of the fixtures they're allowed to have on, about a page and a half. It's already quite short and to the point. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. My next question is this. When are y'all planning to present this to the board? What was your plan?
Well, the concept is to bring it to the board this month. We're in the process right now of sending letters out, and we would like to have, obviously, know more information about how these people can resolve their problems when we do our final inspections.
Okay, you planning on that, but there are other ones out there that need to be taken care of. Now, my point is this: when we hit the public with this, I want to hit them with, we're going to clean up the whole thing. We're not going to piecemeal it, but we got to come back and say, okay, now this group got to do this. And it could be some of the people in the same group that we just got. So, Dave, how do we come up with something that the full gamut of this can be discussed and we can have a sense of direction? Now, 2 weeks from now, I don't think you're going to have enough time. You know, I would love it done, but you know, I want you to get this right and get it, because once it get out there that we got 17 years of backlog, oh, it's not going to be pretty.
Yeah.
You know, and we talking about becoming a water company. Oh boy. Help me out, Dave. November, December, or January, when you have all this figured out.
Well, we've actually got 18 days till the board meeting, so you know, about 2 weeks to write a staff note. I think we're actually pretty close to it. You know, if the general consensus of this committee is draft up the specifics on an amnesty program as the option, that we would be ready to do so. What we're not, and again, what we're only focused on is cleaning up the district's water permits, not legalizing scofflaws who have never come to the district for a water permit and now suddenly saying your illegal fixtures that we have not yet discovered are now legal. There's no intent to legalize unlawful fixtures that have never been subject to a district action. So it's cleaning up our own backlog of discovered unfinished water permits. So I think we're ready to bring it to the board if the direction of this committee is, let's go in that, you know, that option, the amnesty option, and then declare a period of time. I think we have to come up with clarity on the noticing. We may want to actually post a couple notices in the weekly, in the Pine Cone, you know, the back pages. But this is not, and there will be some who we're just never going to reach. You know, they're not going to come in. So let's call it 1,500. Not everybody's going to take advantage of it, but you know, we provide notice, possibly 2 rounds of noticing. We cap the time frame, but at least has to be long enough to let people through the door, but not so long that, you know, it's an ongoing enterprise for a year. Maybe it is a year. I don't know. The staff will have to think through if they want, you know, a 3-month period, a 6-month period, or a year period. But I think we're pretty close to ready. The bigger problems are going to be word of mouth and confusion when somebody tells somebody who tells somebody and they don't hear it directly from us. And then there will also be hurt feelings. Well, that's not fair. I did my permit the right way. You know, fairness is not the issue right now. It's the, how do we clean up a bunch of administrative holes in our data keeping? And, you know, programs like this and done elsewhere, not necessarily water permits, but permit cleanup and so forth. Sometimes it comes with a cost, and the cost in this case will be not collecting capacity fees, not charging for all of our time, and not debiting water from the jurisdiction account. We'll debit the water from basically the district reserve, the unallocated water, which will slightly reduce how much water is left when the 3rd allocation happens, or whatever the future allocations. But at least we'll count it against wet water. The interesting thing is in this case, and I think it was in the staff note, is those demands. Let's say they're exceeding. You know, there's an extra fixture, and they're exceeding what was permitted. those demands are already in the system. So that water usage is happening right now. So by, debiting future available water, we're just kind of recognizing what we already know, that it's already there. So, early on, one of the discussions we had was, do we even need to debit? I think we do, because we're counting water, wet water, as opposed to water that's already in the system. But if these uses, at the board meeting, I'm going to show you what demand for the water year was, and it's gone down again. So we continue to, year in and year out, reduce total demand, yet here are unpermitted demands, at least in one category of what we're trying to clean up, that have been in the system for years. And so the debiting of water, I think, needs to happen from an accounting perspective, but from a practical perspective, it's already there. It's already in the system.
Good.
In many cases, it's the third, fourth homeowner. So, I think we try to come back with a full staff note for that program, if that's your direction, for the October 21st meeting.
Karen, go ahead.
Yeah, my question is just about timing, and it's really a question for Fran and Stephanie and the team, the demand division really is, is 2.5 weeks enough time to address the issues that Fran feels need to be addressed, such as the 1993, the rules may have been different. So what can be asked of people who?
Yeah, we're already doing that, and we always have done that. So that is no change from our existing process. It's just our focus right now is we are focusing our manpower and our writing to get out to these people to get these final inspections completed.
So you think that do both of you feel you can address everything that needs to be addressed in time for the next board meeting?
Yeah, Director Paul, I just want to make sure that the staff note is clear as to what the process is for any differences that may have occurred for the permitting process. I did not find that in the existing staff note. And so I've discussed those with staff. Stephanie has partially written her staff report. Based on my comments, she will have additional information. I did mention the district reserve. I hear the general manager understands that we do need to account for our water, and debiting from the district reserve is a legitimate way that, we can show we're not issuing paper water. So I'm not going anywhere, and Stephanie feels that she can meet the timeline, then I will certainly make myself available to assist so that we can get this to the board. Okay.
Thank you.
Well, if y'all feel comfortable with that, I tried to give you a little bit more time, but y'all want to move things along. That's different, and I appreciate that. So we'll be looking for something. I hope it's something that the board can approve and don't have to kick it back.
I'm a little bit curious about one thing we're talking about, that Dave talked about, is we're already using the water's already getting used. And if we're going to debit it from, isn't it getting debited now?
No.
Pardon? It's not.
No. What happens is when the answer you were
good.
given is on a system-wide basis, it is being accounted for. From the individual property, it is not being accounted for.
Right.
And so if we treat everyone equally, who puts fixtures in their house, then it's like a ledger, Amy, and you have your credits and your debits. And so if we're going to recognize these additional fixtures, then there has to be an offsetting debit. And the district reserve is something that is available now. And we hope it's adequate. We won't know until we get into it. But if your direction is, which I understand, that you don't want to take from existing allocations or future allocations that jurisdictions have, then your option is the district reserve. So it is a legitimate option for you.
And whichever fixtures are found not to have been permitted yet. They have some, I assume some kind of average per year use,
Yes.
that those, that wouldn't make a big obvious hole in the district reserves. It won't show that way.
Yeah, I don't think it's looking that way.
Okay, that's good.
Uh,
I mean, the district reserve will include the unallocated water from the Pure Water Monterey expansion. Actually, the next agenda item is going to be an update on that. And it could be as soon as February. So amnesty is not going to happen in a big manner before February. So we'll have more than, it
Well,
will
that,
not put a big hole in the donut.
that makes sense.
Good.
Dave, are you going to come up with a group of people? Do you think you're going to have to meet with the TAC on this? I know you're going to have to meet with the realtors.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah.
I know that. You know, you might as well put that down right now so we can get that out of the way.
Yeah, I've actually got a meeting set with the realtors for October 14th or 15th, somewhere.
I hope you have this ready.
Well, I was going to spring it on Stephanie that she should plan to come over and.
Naturally, she should be there.
Yeah, no, I think this obviously is something we will communicate with both the TAC members and the other people that are key people. So yeah, this will definitely be communicated.
If you got to adjust we got to do a budget adjustment for advertisement on this one. We should.
Yeah, I think we have enough budget for it, honestly. There are a couple of other things that we need some budget permission on that will come to the board, but.
All right, well,
no, it's a good point.
I'll be looking forward to this, and y'all wrap it up so we can get this out of the way and move along with it. So, do we have any public for any questions on this item?
We have no members of the public.
Okay, no other questions from the committee. What's the next item, Jim?
Yeah, the last item is an update on the 2024-25 water allocation process. I just want to give you kind of a background as we head into the full board meeting. So I invited, I won't call it the TAC, I'll call it the TAG, the Technical Advisory Group, because we expanded it to communication with all city managers and planning directors and designated staff members from the 6 cities, the county, the airport district, and the 3 service branches. We had a meeting on September 12th where 5 of the 6 city managers attended, County Water Resources Agency, as well as County Housing and Community Development Department attended. The Coast Guard and the Navy and the overall rep of the 3, Marlena Brown, attended, and the airport. So very good turnout, number of planning directors as well. So oftentimes 2, even 3 members representing a city. We took a very long and methodical approach to telling them how we are going about doing an allocation of this new water. And it kind of goes with how much water is there? How are we going to allocate it? Why are we relying on growth rates from AMBEG's regional growth forecast? How much water does each jurisdiction use today? When you apply these growth rates on commercial and or non-residential and residential, what do you see 25 years from now? That's what we deem future water needs are. And then we got into the differences between AMBEG's housing cycle RENA numbers versus their own growth rates and what that might dictate water-wise, and then add together, divide by 2 approach. A lot of very good discussion. And then we followed up with a reminder. there was one city, City of Monterey, that was concerned that AMBAG overstates job growth. And so the growth rate for, at least in Monterey's mind, for their city on non-residential may be too high. Seaside, who Andy Merrick was on this call for this committee until about 10 minutes ago, was concerned that they've changed their density for the downtown and that might enable greater population growth. And in both cases, I said, well, you know, AMBAG is going to do its regional growth forecast every 4 years. We're 2 years away from the next one. Be sure that when you meet with them, because you're supposed to meet 2 to 3 times in the cycle of the growth forecast, point these things out. However, double counting job growth would only make it a higher growth rate, which would overstate water use. So that's really not a problem. And higher densities, I don't know if that changes things, but I basically sent out an email to everybody that said some concerns were raised at our meeting. If you want us to treat something differently in your particular instance, please send us correspondence by October 4th. Well, that's tomorrow. I've received nothing to date. I gave them a little over 2 weeks to do so. In the same email, I requested city council meetings beginning after our board meeting. So we meet on the 21st. At our board meeting on the 21st, I will give the board the high-level overview of what we've been doing, and it'll be pretty much the same presentation I will give to each of the city councils. This is our proposal. This is how we're treating your already existing allocations. This is only a portion of what we believe your need is. Here's how we addressed your need, but we're not going to get into the same level of detail. And the reason for going to the city councils rather than just calling a PAC meeting, Policy Advisory Committee meeting, is if we do that, we get one decision maker from a city, and I think it's better that they all hear it. So I currently have 3 firm city council meetings, 1 tentative city council meeting. Also tomorrow, I'll send out reminders to the ones who haven't committed to get me a city council meeting date. And so hopefully I'll have all those dates wrapped up. The goal is to update our board on the 21st. Any follow-ups as a result of the city council meetings, report back to our board on the 18th of November or the 16th of December. I'm assuming it's going to go well. Craig Malin, who's the interim city manager at Seaside, summarized it very succinctly, which is, well, if you're only allocating a portion of the available water and we're able to come back to you for another allocation, so we're not all fighting for the spoils for the last remaining, crumbs, then really what problem do we have? And I think everybody in the room heard that and kind of said, yeah, what's the problem?
Yeah.
So anyway, we're hoping that there's not a whole lot of pushback after city council meetings that would get us off our schedule. So our schedule entails a first reading at the December board meeting, a second reading at the January board meeting, effective date 30 days later in February. So by mid-February, we would have made all these allocations. I do perceive some tweaking is needed because Delray Oaks is a really good example. They don't really have a lot of buildable lots. They've stated in their housing plan that it's almost 100% going to go in the old Fort Ord. So that's not really a burden on us and the water allocation. But when you look at what their growth rate does and what their RENA housing numbers do and do that, add them together and divide by 2, if we were to give them 50%, it would only be 4 acre feet. And that just seems low to me. So we might kind of, in their case, say, we're going to give you, 8 acre feet because you may get more ADUs in our service territory than you've really allocated for. So they're the only odd one. In the case of the airport and the service branches, we've proposed 50% of their stated need through the survey process. And then all the other jurisdictions we've proposed, I believe it's 30%.
Yeah, I think you said about a third.
Yeah. So there may be some pushback on those amounts, but that's pretty much what the point of going to the cities are, which is here's our proposal. Everyone in the room recognized that the real problem is the lifting of the CDO and the moratorium, and that all the allocation in the world is really not going to help with that problem. They need to get on board. And there was a lot of offers of help. You know, what do you need from us to help lift the CDO? So I think we've got the cities willing to join. In a separate effort, I'm currently meeting with our different associations. So I've met with the Business Coalition, the Realtors coming up, the, who am I missing? Oh, the Monterey Peninsula Chamber of Commerce, to talk to them primarily about working with us to lift the cease and desist order. But the other issue is what happened in the rate case.
Yeah.
And then in the realtor's case, we're going to add the third item, which is the discussion of an amnesty program and cleaning up the water permits. But so, you know, I think we're making really good progress. We've encouraged them to not allocate water for projects that'll come online before pure water expansion comes online. But I'm already seeing places where that there may be a little requesting to bend it, because there's a small scale affordable housing project in Monterey that could be partially complete before pure water expansion comes online. And I'm not so sure we would want to prevent that. You know, CalAM's currently not in violation, and there's a bit of a surplus. So I don't feel like we need to quash every good project that comes along and say we're not going to approve a water permit. But I think you know, first things first, let's get an allocation into the hands of our jurisdictions and then see what their needs are and whether they present us a problem or not. We may have an issue with the schedule on the expansion, not from construction, but because of the regulators, the Division of Drinking Water. So we're trying to address any regulatory delays right now with a year to go. So that's it.
Dave, could you let us know when you're meeting with the city councils?
Yeah, I'll have that whole schedule together. I think it's an agenda item on our October board meeting.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Hopefully I'll have all the
Yes, it is.
scheduled. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, so that's a separate item that you're gonna do in a agenda item. Good,
Yep.
Good. Yeah, Dave, you need to push to the cities and everybody that we're gonna move ahead and hope to have that first reading in December.
Yeah.
So nobody don't want to meet or change their numbers. Just tell them that, you know, I probably tell them that at the board meeting on how we're going to move ahead. So
Well, it'll be telling to see if anybody gets any correspondence to us by tomorrow's, deadline.
Yeah.
Because, there were a couple squeaky wheels, and we gave them notification that if you want us to consider your points that you made, let us know. But again, I don't think the order of magnitude of either of the two concerns really matters. It's not going to change what we're doing very much. So I think you're right, just keep moving ahead.
Yeah, we need to move ahead so we can get that part done. So, clean up water permits and stuff we're making things happen. So
Yeah, it's good.
it's good for everybody. Anybody in the public need to comment on this, Sarah?
Chair Edwards, there are no members of the public in attendance.
Okay, thank you. Jim, we have anything else?
Nope, we outlasted our public.
Okay. Committee members, do you have anything you want to add to the future?
I don't. I just want to thank Dave for, the work he's done so far to explain to the jurisdictions, the work on allocation, having a fair process that's understandable and fair, very important. And
Well, I
yeah.
told them at the beginning of the meeting that it was going to be, it could be painful, and it was going to be very linear. And you could see as they were getting into the 70th minute, can we jump ahead? Can we? No, let me take you here.
Yeah.
So the punchline is this, right? Well, we're getting to that, but we had a hard stop for at least two of them at the 90-minute mark. And at the 90th minute, we had gotten all the way through it and had a little bit of commentary back. And so I think it was worth it from the standpoint that we are now in a very strong position to say, hey, look, your staff knows how we got there. So I'm not going to explain to you, Mr. Council Member, how we, your growth rate is the AMBAG population growth rate for 25 years, and it is blank. I don't have to show you how we remapped your consumption to your production and blah, blah, blah. And I think from my standpoint, it was good to have their staff understand that there's method to this.
Yeah.
So,
And if any council members really do want to know, they can get that.
we'll give them the
information.
long course. We'll set up a
Yeah.
meeting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think it also might make it clear to some of the people that haven't made, let's say, paid a lot of attention to how we're counting water and how Cal-Am might be counting water. They get to actually see it and they can think about it.
That's a really good point, because when you start to scratch your head over this, okay, so you've counted population and you're counting legal lots of record and you're counting houses. It's kind of hard to put some of those ornaments on this tree once you realize how, how we counted it. And
that's great. It's really good. You can't say that I haven't dived into the deep end.
Yep.
Dave, you're gonna be able to tell them how many acre feet that they're gonna be receiving, right?
Yeah.
We talking about, okay, good.
Yep. Yeah, it basically is, the short course is, we figure out how much you use today. We figure out how much you need in the future based on, we figure out what you use today, how fast you're going to grow. That tells us how much you need in the future. And so this is how we determine how fast you are going to grow. And we point to AMBAG, and then we say at the end, but wait, how does that line up with all my housing needs? And, the confession is going to be, it doesn't. And and AMBAG is very self-referencing, self-reflective, and they just didn't make it line up. Hopefully they do next time.
Yeah.
But even if you throw out all of our assumptions and put in housing assumptions, the total number is very similar. It doesn't move a whole lot, but it changes. It moves water from like Seaside to Monterey, and it moves it around because of how they put these housing numbers together. That's really not our issue right now. And we're just going to tell them, we're getting you started, and then you show us who's going to grow. And then we'll take care of the neediest ones with a second allocation as soon as that need manifests.
Okay.
So
Thank you, GM. Thank you, Mr. Laredo. Thank you, Fran. Thank you, Stephanie and Sarah. So thank you all for that. I know a little rough meeting for you there, Stephanie, but I know you're going to battle through it. See you on the next one.
You betcha.
All right. Meeting adjourned.
Thank you all.
Thank you all.
Stay cool if you can.
Bye-bye.
Bye.